A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
On a Monday, we like to update the week's political agenda with the Australian Christian Lobby. Joshua Rowe is the ACL State Director for New South Wales and the ACT. Hey Joshua, special welcome back to 2020.
Thanks, Neil. It's always good to be with you.
Joshua, let's start with the Tasmanian state election after the delivery of a hung parliament, and we were predicting this even late last week. This is what the likely outcome might be. But now both sides are actually looking at their options and possibilities for forming government. So it's not all just cut and dried black and white at this point. But did you have a perception or two around the outcome?
Well, it's another hung parliament, and so as you say, Neil, there will be some power broking and seeking out of some alliances to try and form government. It seems to me that would be more likely for the Liberals, given that they've achieved about 14 seats there. But nevertheless, Labor, with potentially, they usually have the support of the Greens as well, may be able to make some negotiations to form government there. I think this would be frustrating for Tasmanians and a little bit hard to stomach, I would say, just because there was this vote of no confidence and they've had to go back to the polls, twice in 16 months. And now there's sort of still no definitive answer. And if I was a resident of Tasmania, in many ways that would frustrate me. There was one thing that was said by the Labor opposition leader, Dean Winters, though, which was, we don't want to go back to the polls again, and we won't be. This is a sign from the Tasmanian people that we need greater unity and collaboration on our policy. Now, I don't think that's a bad sentiment at all. In fact, I would pray for that in politics, is that, despite our differences, and we do need distinct differences between parties so that we have different political philosophies and policies and agendas to vote for. But we also want to see that collaboration within politics, because it often ends with the best policy shaped and formed for the people. And so if they can bring that kind of collaborative sentiment in, I think that could be really positive. But I'm sure for people on both sides of politics, be it Labor or Liberal, have that underlying sense of frustration that there just hasn't been that definitive answer as to who's going to govern.
Yes, and if the opposition leader, Dean Winter, if he's reflecting that he might just give way to the Liberals, that might be a little bit of forced humility there, because the lowest vote in more than a century for the Labor Party, a 2.9% swing against it, primary vote just 26.1%. And, of course, there's some of the commentariat who are saying, well, if they actually do get to form government, that would be a little bit of a slap in the face for Tasmanians. So still some more to come with that. It could be weeks before we know the final outcome. In fact, I don't think they're even counting some of the postal votes, pre-poll votes, until even later this week. Hey, come back to your territory here, New South Wales, ACT. Let's talk New South Wales and changing sex in New South Wales. Some direct implications of the Equality Bill, which passed in October last year. What's happening in your territory there?
Yeah, so listeners will probably remember me talking with you, Neil, about the Equality Bill. We did some extensive campaigning on it, and thankfully we were able to wind back that legislation quite significantly from good advocacy across the community in New South Wales. However, there was that provision that got through around sex self-ID, which allowed people to actually self-designate or choose the sex that's on their birth certificate, independent of their biological sex, which would have been assigned to them at birth, or recognised, should I say, at birth. Now, as of the 1st of July this year, that's come into effect. And we've seen that it's just quite absurd, really. It's only $70 and a 15 to 20 minute application online, and you can change your sex on your birth certificate, and that's legally binding right across Australia. Your legal culpability is dependent on that new that new sex that you've self-designated. And there's even, Neil, no limit to the number of times that you can change. So despite the fact that that's crazy in my mind, it's also what a burden on births, deaths and marriages that they're going to have to continue to receive these applications potentially from someone who's toggling back and forth. So you just kind of see the holes in this everywhere. And it's something that we continue along with coming against gender affirming care and the implications that has on kids. We continue to push back against this ideology being prevalent in our institutions like this, because it's creating all these legal problems with just how unfounded it is. It's just not based in truth or reality at all.
Yeah, well, just to pause and reflect for a moment, $70, a 15 or 20 minute online application, and you can change your sex in New South Wales. As you can do this sort of thing in other states as well, but it's come into effect in New South Wales. And as you say, though, Joshua, it's a burden on births, deaths and marriages, but toggling backwards and forth. At least there is an opportunity for people to toggle backwards and forth. Somebody hasn't closed that loophole yet, and we hope that they don't. But look, I can only imagine that there will be some who are rushing to take advantage of opportunities like this, changing their sex on their birth certificate. Is there anything comes to mind from you so far as the frequency or the sort of people who are changing their sex?
I think one of the real concerns is safety for women when it comes to this legislation, and that is bad actors, specifically men who are convicted or incriminated, actually coming forward and changing their sex descriptor on their birth certificate to female, and then actually being able to access female spaces and places. And we've seen this in New South Wales. There's been reports just over the last couple of weeks of Terry Doney, a particular gentleman who was serving a 43-year sentence for murder. He murdered a woman, and he's obviously been confined in a male prison. But a few years ago, he made an application actually to transfer to a female prison because he'd started undertaking hormone replacement therapy and wanted to change his gender identity. And then all of a sudden there was this question going on for a couple of years. Do we approve this particular gentleman, this biological male, going to the female prison? Because now we affirm this idea that you can self-choose your sex. And there was a bit of a pause because people didn't know what to do with this. It wasn't aligning with the ideology, but they also realised that it wasn't safe. And so we saw on the 11th of July, just the other week, that acting Premier Ryan Park, who's actually the health minister as well, said that I don't find this acceptable, and I don't think anyone in the community would find it acceptable. And there is no way that this particular biological man, Terry Doney, is going to transfer to a female prison. But at the same time, that runs completely in odds with this idea that a man can change to be a woman on their birth certificate and have access to all of those spaces and places and groups. So it's affirming sex-based rights for women within the prison system, which is a great thing. We obviously don't want men coming into the women's prisons and abusing them. But at the same time, it's not affirming sex-based rights for women just outside of incarceration, like thinking of women's shelters for women who have faced domestic violence, for example. They're not entitled to sex-based rights anymore, and those shelters can't refuse biological men who have chosen to identify in their birth certificate as female. So the hypocrisy and the double standard we're seeing here is really evident, and it just shows that this is what happens when you base laws off fantasy and not off truth. You see these kind of absurdities happening and contradictions, and it's only going to threaten women's safety in these instances.
Wow, you make a powerful point when you say that when they're considering safety for women in prison, if they do stop biological males changing their sex and changing over, the idea that they'd be protecting the women in the prisons while not protecting women outside the prisons, that does make a pretty significant point. Hey, let's move on. The New South Wales Law Reform Commission, they're reviewing the Anti-Discrimination Act in New South Wales, looking to try and modernise it. What's the latest here?
Yeah, so the word modernise when it comes to legislation does raise red flags, and it's ominous. Not because we don't want to see legislation incrementally improved, but improved, should I say, but you see with modernisation that often there's greater restriction on freedom of speech, especially when it comes to anti-discrimination law and anti-vilification law. So this review, it presents both opportunity for us, but also the potential for bad reform that we've got to guard against. We have been involved in this consultation process for some time. So the review was commissioned by the Attorney General in New South Wales, Michael Daly, just after the 2023 election, so some time ago now. And we submitted to that review back in September of 23. In the time that's elapsed between when that review began and when the consultation paper was released just at the start of this year, Neil, one of the things we saw again around the time of Alex Greenwich pushing his equality bill was some changes that he proposed in that bill to the Anti-Discrimination Act. Now, those changes were to remove exemptions or protections for Christian schools and other religious institutions to be able to hire people on the basis of their faith and living out their faith in the school environment or in the institution's environment. So he then removed all of those proposed amendments from the Equality Bill and said, I'm going to work to use this review, the New South Wales Law Reform Commission's review, as the vehicle through which I bring that change about. So we know that Alex Greenwich and the politicians who are on the left in the left working group want to actually use this review as a pathway through which to remove certain protections for religious freedom. And so what we'll be doing through the process is actually seeking to strengthen a positive right or a positive protection for religious freedom in New South Wales so that Christians and other faith groups, but Christians who we represent, are able to confidently express their belief, confidently share their belief and act in accordance to their belief in the workplace without fear of discrimination, i.e. being fired, for example, from work or being undergoing disciplinary review for not wearing purple on Wear It Purple Day because of their ethic around sexuality and sex. So that would be an example of something we'd want to protect. And so we're going to be working through this review to try and get positive protections. At a minimum, we want to keep those exemptions in place for religious institutions and for Christian schools.
Okay. All right. So it's good to hear that it's not just a defensive strategy and trying to resist the change that so many in the LGBT community will be thinking is just inevitable, that's just moving this way. But just really positive to hear that you've got some positive reform ideas to put in there as well. Just great stuff. And I know that you're wanting to engage supporters of the ACL around helping this happen. Is some sort of campaign you've got planned?
I can think of three things straight away that I would love listeners and supporters to think about. The first one is actually this Friday, I'm sitting on the round table in front of the New South Wales Law Reform Commission, the Honourable Tom Bathurst, who's leading this review, and I'll be making representation on behalf of ACL and all of our supporters. Your prayers to me are very valuable leading up to that, 2 p.m. on a Friday. So if you've got a pen and paper or your phone with you and you'd note down that time and pray for me leading up into that, just that I really bring wisdom and discernment in that representation of the Christian community in New South Wales, I would be very, very grateful. The second thing that I can think of is we're actually putting together a website that outlines some of the examples of discrimination against Christians, things like the big profile ones like Israel Folau, with Rugby Australia, right down to small examples of everyday Australian Christians who have faced discrimination in the workplace on the basis of their belief. And what we'll be actually seeking to do is outline some of those examples so that people understand what we're looking for, and then asking people to send in and share their stories if they've encountered that kind of discrimination on the basis of their belief when they've expressed their Christian belief or ethic within the workplace, within education, within the public environment. So that's something I would really love once it's launched for people just to be thinking about that and engaging with that through our website. And finally, we have right across New South Wales volunteer leaders, and they are responsible for coordinating activities with churches, with Christian groups within the community, and also with their local Member of Parliament. One of the things we're going to be doing in this campaign over the coming year is actually seeking to get our volunteer leaders to bring principals of Christian schools, teachers, parents into the room with politicians and actually tell them about how much they love their Christian schooling, parents talking about how important it is to them that they have parental choice over the moral education of their children, and also just explaining why those exemptions are so important for maintaining communities of faith that uphold a biblical ethic around important issues for Christians. So if anyone wants to become a volunteer with ACL, they can join via our website. And also, if they want to express interest for being a volunteer leader, to bring principals and people into those conversations, you can also submit through our contact form on our website an expression of interest in that, and I will receive that, and I'd love to work with you or have a phone call about making that a possibility. Yeah.
And, I'm aware that you've got a really substantial database. The people who are followers, supporters, people who are prepared to roll up their sleeves, and even though they don't understand all of the ins and outs the way you've just described what's happening with this Law Reform Commission in New South Wales, I know that there'll be a lot of people saying, well, if you've got a campaign going, I think I'd like to jump on board. And there might be all sorts of things. And you're saying, share what you know. And you're saying there's going to be people on the ground and there's going to be activities across the state of New South Wales when it comes to this law reform process. And I know that listeners too will be keeping you in their prayers as you're a part of that round table presenting this coming Friday, 2 p.m, I think you said. And you know what? I think listeners too, someone's going to make a note of that and saying, I'm going to pray for Joshua. He's going to be there and he's going into bat for Christianity, for Christian believers, for religious organisations who are under threat from some of the things that have been rising in New South Wales. Hey, very, very quickly, because we are out of time, developments in New South Wales around the conversion practices ban bill. A very quick one on this one, Joshua. Where are things at?
Well, the short version is, Neil, that they've come into effect. The way that the body Anti-Discrimination New South Wales has communicated the laws in terms of answering frequently asked questions and giving resources about the implications of those laws has been quite confronting for a lot of people in the church, especially ministry leaders and pastors. Some of the indication from the resources even suggests that prayers for people who are from the LGBTQ plus community who are identifying as such would be banned under this legislation. And we believe that the resources that have been provided by this bureaucratic body, the Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, are actually out of alignment with the legislation itself. So there's particular protections that are built in for religious freedom, for parents, for people to express a biblical view on sex and sexuality. And we believe that this is out of alignment. So it's really spooked people into believing that it is actually, that we have to ban prayer. And likewise, we've been advocating with the government, but also speaking with Anti-Discrimination New South Wales about amending this as soon as possible.
Well, it's that issue, isn't it, that really is prominent in the way that we recognise a criminalising of Christian activities, a criminalising of Christian leaders. And if you don't stand up and speak out, then you're on this slope, you're on this spiral downwards. And it's people like you, Joshua Rowe, special honour to you. and all the team at the Australian Christian Lobby for standing up and having a say and making sure that a Christian voice is heard when all of these deliberations are happening. For listeners, you can connect with Joshua at acl.org.au. You might want to be one of those volunteers and some of the activities that Joshua's got planned with those campaigns in New South Wales. And you know what? There'll be campaigns in other states and territories too that the Australian Christian Lobby is running. You can find out about those sorts of things at the ACL website, acl.org.au. Joshua Rowe, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today on 2020.
Pleasure. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.